You are doing something every day that is constantly holding you back. And I did the opposite of that thing for just one day. And trust me, the results were bigger than I expected. So deep inside your brain, there's something called the temporal lobe. And inside this temporal lobe lives your perirhinal cortex. Now, anytime you encounter a new information, say for example, you read a new chapter from your book, or you encounter a fact or some new technique that you can use in your job, then the neurons inside of that your perinal cortex would fire up with electrical signals, and this will happen in a very fast rate. However, when you encounter that information the second time or again, the rate at which those electrical signals fire up will drastically reduce. This is what your brain uses to tag that information as being encountered before. So the familiarity signal comes from the drop in the rate at which those electrical signals in your perinal cortex are being fired up. So this is good when you want to memorize, when you want to recognize a face, or when you want to recognize that you've gone to somewhere before, you've been to a particular place before. However, when you are trying to place an information in your long-term memory or apply that information to something like your exam, your test, your job, then having that familiarity signal or creating that familiarity signal is going to be a problem because it would ensure that the other parts of your memory system that creates long-term memory do not work. So in order for you to form long-term memory, other systems in your head like your prefrontal lobe and your hippocampus have to work together to encode this information. But when your perinal cortex has already fired or dropped the rate at which they fire the electrical signals to your neurons, then those other systems in your brain no longer work as much to encode this information into your long-term memory. This then causes you to assume that you already know the information or that you already assimilated the information. However, it has not really been strengthened. So the memory traces in your head that causes you to remember information for long term or apply the information in doing something like an exam or test are not formed because your familiarity signal has already been set in your perinal cortex. The thing I said initially that you're doing is that you, when you read or come and encounter a new information that you want to store in your long-term memory, you read it the first time, and then you read it again, and then you read it again. The trick is not to give your brain the opportunity to send that familiarity signal again, right? So when you read an information for the first time, the neurons in your brain fire with electrical signals, right? But in order for you to stop the familiarity signal from being fired, you need to